My name is Brooke Adams, and I'm currently 32 years old. Never in my life did I imagine a scenario where I would be forced to involve law enforcement against my own parents. Yet that's exactly what happened. Just 3 years ago, after more than a decade of relentless effort, sleepless nights, and meticulously saving every single dollar I could, I achieved something I had dreamed of since I was a teenager. I bought my very first home. My home. It was more than just property to me. It was a symbol of independence, a reward for my perseverance, and a haven I had built with my own hands. The relationship I shared with my parents had always been fragile, strained. There was a tension in our dynamic that never really went away, and the root of it? Their unwavering favoritism toward my younger sister, Stephanie. I used to convince myself that maybe I was just being overly sensitive or that I was imagining things, but eventually, the imbalance became too blatant to ignore. The day everything unraveled began like any other, until I opened my front door to find my parents standing there. But they weren't alone. A moving truck idled behind them, and their expressions were filled not with warmth or surprise, but a cold sense of entitlement. Without asking, without even notifying me, they had arrived, fully prepared to dismantle my life, to remove me from the very home I had fought so hard to claim. If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal from the people who are supposed to be your unwavering support system, then you'll understand the heartbreak I felt. And if you can relate to any of this, I invite you to share where you're watching from in the comments below. If your own family has ever tested the boundaries of loyalty and trust, consider subscribing, because this story only gets more twisted. I grew up just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in what most people would call a pleasant suburban neighborhood. Our house was a modest 4-bedroom, in a peaceful community, surrounded by decent schools and friendly faces. My father, Thomas, worked as an accountant, while my mother, Karen, taught at the local elementary school. We weren't rich, but we had enough to live comfortably. Still, comfort didn't mean fairness, not in our household. Stephanie, my younger sister by 5 years, was always the center of their universe. From the moment she arrived, the dynamics shifted. She was the one they doted on, praised, and coddled. Meanwhile, I was just there, an afterthought in my own family. I remember my 10th birthday as if it happened yesterday. My father presented me with a used bicycle he'd patched together. It was rusty, the tires worn thin, and the seat had seen better days. I smiled, said thank you, and rode it like it was new. I didn't expect more. I had learned better. 5 years later, Stephanie turned 10 and was gifted a sparkling new bicycle, complete with a shiny helmet and pink streamers on the handlebars. When I cautiously pointed out the difference, my mother simply looked at me and said, "Stephanie has always been a little more sensitive. You understand, don't you?" And yes, I did understand. I understood that no matter what I did, her needs would always come first. The same pattern followed us into adolescence. In high school, I wanted to attend a prestigious summer science program that could help my college application stand out. My parents told me they couldn't afford it, so I got a job at the local grocery store, working late nights and weekends to cover the cost myself. But when Stephanie wanted to go to cheerleading camp, they didn't hesitate to pay for the entire thing up front. "Your sister needs these kinds of activities to help build her confidence," my father told me. "You've always been independent." That statement wasn't a compliment. It was a rationalization. They used my self-reliance as an excuse to deny me the same support they gave freely to her. By the time college applications rolled around, I knew I couldn't count on them. I filled out endless scholarship forms, took on more hours at my job, and eventually secured a substantial merit-based scholarship to Boston University. It wasn't enough to cover everything, so I still had to rely on loans and part-time work to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my parents paid for Stephanie's full tuition at a private liberal arts college. She changed her major 3 times, took an extra year to graduate, and ended up with a degree in communications, all fully funded by our parents. I graduated in just over 3 years, majoring in business and marketing, juggling jobs, summer courses, and internships. I finished with honors. No applause, no celebration. Just a quiet nod at the graduation ceremony and a ride back home. After college, I landed an entry-level job at a marketing agency in Boston. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was modest, but it was a start. I shared a tiny apartment with 2 roommates and poured every ounce of energy into my work. Every promotion I received was earned through sacrifice. I worked nights, weekends, and holidays. Within 5 years, I climbed the ranks to become a senior marketing manager, and 3 years later, I was named the youngest marketing executive in the company's history. I never lost sight of my goal. I lived well below my means, invested smartly, and slowly built up my savings. I wasn't chasing luxury. I was chasing freedom. The freedom to live on my terms, in a space that was truly mine. At 29, I finally made it. I put down a substantial payment on a beautiful 3-bedroom home in an upscale neighborhood. It had hardwood floors, large windows that bathed each room in sunlight, and a cozy backyard where I could unwind after long days. The day I got the keys, I walked through the empty house, tears rolling down my cheeks. Not because I was sad, but because I was overwhelmed with pride. This wasn't just a home, it was a testament to every hardship I had overcome, every sleepless night, every rejection, and every bit of determination I had summoned along the way. I invited my parents and Stephanie to my housewarming party. I hoped, perhaps foolishly, that this might be the moment they'd acknowledge my accomplishments. They showed up, walked through the rooms with lukewarm expressions, and my mother said, "It's very nice, Brooke, but don't you think it's a little too big for someone living alone?" No congratulations, no "we're proud of you," just another subtle jab disguised as a question. Meanwhile, Stephanie had met Jason Roberts during her final year in college. He came from a wealthy family and worked alongside his father in a lucrative investment firm. Their wedding was lavish, the kind you see in magazines. My parents, who once said they couldn't afford to contribute to my education, poured money into the event like it was a royal affair. I was one of the bridesmaids. I smiled for the photos, wore the dress I paid for myself, and tried not to choke on the bitterness swelling in my chest. In the years that followed, I threw myself into making my house a reflection of who I was. I renovated the kitchen, painted each room in colors that made me feel at peace, and hand-picked furniture that suited my taste. Every inch of that home was a reflection of my journey, built not with handouts or shortcuts, but with resolve and grit. One of the bedrooms in my house had been transformed into a home office, a quiet, productive space where I could focus, take video calls, and manage the demands of my high-level marketing role without the distractions of city noise or roommates. The third bedroom was a guest room, tastefully decorated and ready for the occasional visitor, though it rarely saw overnight guests. Still, just having that room brought me comfort. It symbolized how far I had come, from shared apartments and borrowed space to owning a place entirely my own. My house was more than shelter, it was my refuge, a tangible result of years of perseverance and independence. It was the first place in my life where I wasn't constantly compared to Stephanie, where I could finally exist without living in someone else's shadow. But everything shifted 2 months ago. It began with something simple, a phone call from my mother inviting me to Sunday dinner. That in itself was surprising. Our family usually only gathered on major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, maybe Easter, but spontaneous dinners were not typical. So I accepted, curious and slightly hopeful that maybe things were turning a corner. When I arrived at my parents' home, Stephanie and her husband Jason were already seated at the table. They were glowing with anticipation, and I didn't need a crystal ball to sense a big announcement was on its way. Sure enough, before we even got through the salad course, they dropped the news. Stephanie was pregnant. Their first child was on the way, and the room erupted with joy. My mother burst into tears, sobbing with joy as she clutched Stephanie's hand. My father stood up and uncorked a bottle of premium champagne he'd apparently been saving, pouring a toast for everyone. Sparkling cider for the mom-to-be, of course. The rest of the evening became a jubilant celebration of impending grandparenthood. Laughter echoed, toasts were made, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation for this new chapter in their lives. I genuinely offered my congratulations and did my best to participate in the joy. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the sting. Just hours earlier, I had shared that I had been promoted to a new role at work, a significant step up in my career. But my achievement was overshadowed, swallowed whole by the excitement of a baby announcement. Not a single follow-up question. Not even a, "That's great, Brooke." My moment vanished the second Stephanie spoke. At the time, I had no idea that this dinner would mark the beginning of an emotional tug-of-war that would push every boundary I had built, test the limits of my patience, and force me to reevaluate my role within our family. Roughly a week later, I got a casual call from my father. "Brooke, remind me again, how many bedrooms are in that house of yours?" he asked, his tone light but inquisitive. I replied, a bit puzzled. 3. My bedroom, my office, and a guest room. Why? He paused. "Oh, just curious. Your mother and I were talking about how much space you've got. Seems like quite a lot for just one person." That comment stuck with me, though I tried to laugh it off. It was subtle, yet it hinted at something more, something that didn't sit right with me. A few days after that, my mother called with an update that seemed conveniently timed. Jason had been laid off from his job at his father's firm. Apparently, the company was facing unexpected financial strain and had begun cutting even family members from the payroll. It was shocking, considering Jason had always exuded confidence about his secure future and status. "This couldn't have come at a worse time, with a baby on the way," my mother sighed over the phone. They're really worried now about how they'll manage. I expressed my concern, but also mentioned that Jason came from a wealthy family, and Stephanie had been steadily employed as a social media manager for a boutique agency. Surely they weren't facing total financial ruin. My mother hesitated, then lowered her voice like she was sharing state secrets. They've been living far beyond their means for years. That apartment in the city, the rent is astronomical, and the credit card debt, it's more than I want to admit. This was news to me. Stephanie and Jason had always maintained a picture-perfect lifestyle. Designer clothes, weekend getaways, luxury baby announcements. I had assumed their finances matched the life they portrayed. I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. While I had scrimped and saved, they had splurged and swiped. But I kept those thoughts to myself. Over the next few weeks, the frequency of calls increased, and so did the subtle references to how much space I had. Every phone conversation came with an offhand comment. "You're so lucky to have extra rooms," or "It must be nice to stretch out like that." I sensed a narrative being built, and then the suggestion finally arrived. During one of our calls, my father said, "Brooke, you know your sister and Jason are scrambling to find a new place before the baby arrives. That guest room of yours would make the perfect nursery, don't you think?" I felt my stomach drop. "Dad, are you suggesting they move into my home?" "It's only temporary," he responded quickly, "just until they find their footing again. Think about it. You've got space they desperately need. You'd be doing them a huge favor." I replied calmly, "That space isn't just extra, Dad. My guest room is used when friends stay over, and I need my office to work from home. What you could shift your office into that room, and they could use your master bedroom. It's only fair since they'll have the baby. You can take one of the smaller rooms for now. It's what family does." I ended the call feeling completely unsettled. The entitlement in his voice, the assumption that I would rearrange my life and surrender my master suite like it was nothing. It left me shaken. I called Audrey, my best friend since college, someone who knew my family dynamics all too well. "They expect you to give up your master bedroom?" Audrey asked, incredulous. "In your own house? That you paid for?" "Apparently," I sighed, "and from the way my dad was talking, I doubt it's a temporary plan." "You need to shut that down now," Audrey warned. "If you let them in, they'll never leave. They'll guilt you into more and more until you have no space left, physically or emotionally." She was right. But confrontation had never been easy for me. Years of being labeled the strong one, the independent daughter, had conditioned me to accept imbalance quietly. Still, this was my home, my one safe place, and I couldn't let it be taken from me. The next time my mother called, her tone was laced with subtle disapproval. Another mention of all that room going unused, followed by a sigh and silence. That's when I knew I had to draw the line. "Mom," I said firmly, "I care about Stephanie and Jason, and I'm truly sorry for what they're going through, but I'm not okay with them moving into my house." The other end of the line went silent. Then, in a voice suddenly cool and clipped, she replied, "I see. So you're unwilling to help your own pregnant sister when she's struggling." "That's not what I said," I answered, trying to stay composed, even as my pulse quickened. "I'm happy to help in other ways," I told her, my voice steady but gentle. "But having them move into my house just isn't the right solution." There was a sharp pause on the other end of the phone before my mother snapped back, her voice filled with indignation. "I never thought you'd be so selfish, Brooke. Your sister would do it for you in a heartbeat." That familiar sting of guilt washed over me, but I forced myself to hold firm. The conversation spiraled downward from there. My mother didn't hold back, layering on every ounce of guilt she could summon. Every sentence dripped with emotional manipulation. She dredged up past favors I barely remembered, twisted my words to make me sound cruel, and made it seem as if I was condemning a newborn to homelessness. By the time the call ended, I was emotionally exhausted and overwhelmed with self-doubt. Yet beneath all that, a flicker of resolve still burned inside me. I had drawn a boundary, and no matter how much pressure they applied, I intended to hold it. But my family wasn't finished. They had no intention of accepting my answer. Not really. Over the next few weeks, Stephanie began dropping by more often. Sometimes she'd say she was just in the neighborhood. Other times she'd bring over cookies or flowers, gestures that felt oddly performative. But every visit followed the same pattern. She'd wander through my home, commenting, not so subtly, about how perfect the guest room would be for a crib, or how much she adored the natural light in the master bedroom. It was like my previous conversations with our parents had never happened. My words, my wishes, they didn't matter. One afternoon, she stepped into my home office, a space that represented years of grinding through late nights and tight deadlines, and stood in the center like she owned it. "This room has such good energy," she mused. I can totally picture a changing table, right where your desk is." I felt my jaw tighten. "Stephanie," I said, not unkindly but with absolute clarity, "I've already made it clear to you, Mom and Dad, that you and Jason cannot move in here. This is my space. I need it." Her expression shifted instantly. The wide, tearful eyes came next, the ones she'd perfected over decades. "I can't believe you're being like this," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm pregnant. Don't you care about your niece or nephew at all?" I inhaled slowly. "Of course I care," I replied, "but caring doesn't mean surrendering my home. This place is where I live. It's not a backup plan." She left abruptly that day, slamming the door on her way out. Less than an hour later, I received a flurry of furious texts from both my parents, accusing me of cruelty and selfishness for making their pregnant daughter cry. The pressure was intensifying. I could feel it from all directions. But I stood firm, even as my anxiety crept up with every confrontation. I didn't realize then that they weren't retreating. They were regrouping. It was a Saturday morning in early June when the situation reached its boiling point. I had finally carved out a peaceful weekend for myself. No work emails, no phone calls, just a good book, a pot of tea, and a plan to do a little gardening. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and for a brief moment, I felt like I could breathe again. Then the doorbell rang. I padded over, still in my lounge clothes, and opened the door to find two men in delivery uniforms standing beside an enormous cardboard box on my porch. One of them glanced at his clipboard. "Delivery for Adams," he said. "We've got a crib and changing table scheduled for delivery and in-home assembly." I blinked at him, completely thrown. I didn't order any baby furniture," I said, confused. He double-checked the form. "This is 147 Maple Street." "Yes, it is. And I'm Brooke Adams." He turned the clipboard toward me, showing the form. There, in black and white, was the name of the purchaser, Stephanie Roberts. But the delivery address? It was undeniably mine. The realization hit me like a brick. Stephanie had ordered baby furniture. To my house. Without asking me, without warning, as if it was already a done deal. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice rising slightly. "But there's been a misunderstanding. This delivery wasn't authorized. You'll need to take it back." The delivery men exchanged awkward glances but nodded. As they began hauling the items back to their truck, I grabbed my phone and called the delivery company directly, using the customer service number on the paperwork. After battling through automated menus and a long wait on hold, I finally reached a representative who confirmed the truth. Stephanie Roberts had placed the order 3 weeks ago, with instructions for it to be delivered to my address. My hands trembled as I ended the call. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't even a miscommunication. This was a calculated move, a tactic to force my hand. Stephanie had deliberately sent baby furniture to my home, fully expecting that I would be too overwhelmed or embarrassed to refuse. I immediately tried calling her, straight to voicemail. Then I called my parents. Same result, no one was picking up. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We'll be stopping by around noon. We have something important to discuss." I fired back a reply, heart pounding. "Did you know Stephanie sent baby furniture to my house today?" No response. By noon, I was a storm of emotions. Anger, anxiety, disbelief. I stood by the front window, waiting. And then, I saw it. A large commercial moving truck rolled up in front of my house. Behind it, Jason's SUV pulled into the driveway. My parents exited the truck and Stephanie stepped out of the SUV with a serene smile, as if this was just another Sunday afternoon get-together. I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. "What is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother approached me with a grin so wide and artificial it made my skin crawl. "Surprise! We're here to help you move." "Move?" I echoed, stunned. "Move where?" "Well," she began, using the patronizing tone I remembered from childhood. "Your father and I have been thinking. Stephanie and Jason need more space, and you have this big house all to yourself. So we found you a lovely studio apartment downtown. It's closer to your office, and perfect for someone your age." My mouth went dry. They weren't just trying to insert Stephanie into my life anymore. They were planning to remove me from it entirely. From my own home. "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. "It makes perfect sense," my father added, swinging open the truck's back door to reveal rows of flattened cardboard boxes and packing tape. "The new place is fully furnished, so you'll only need to bring your essentials. We can help you pack up and have you moved by this evening." "And then we can start setting up the nursery?" Stephanie chimed in enthusiastically, waddling slowly up the driveway with one hand cradling her barely noticeable baby bump. At just 4 months pregnant, she had that glowing aura of expectant motherhood and an infuriating sense of entitlement. I already have so many fun ideas for the theme. I'm thinking soft pastels, maybe a mural of baby animals on the wall. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at them, barely able to process the audacity of what was unfolding. "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking but growing louder with every word. "I paid for it. I bought it with my own money. You can't just show up and decide to move me out." My mother rolled her eyes, her tone sharp and scolding. "Don't be so selfish, Brooke. Your sister needs a proper place to raise her child. You're one person. You don't need all this space." "It's not about needing space," I shot back. "It's about what's mine. I spent years scraping together every cent to buy this house, while Stephanie and Jason blew through money like it grew on trees. Their poor financial planning is not my burden to carry." "Family helps family," my father chimed in solemnly, as if that single phrase made all of this acceptable. "Stephanie would do the same for you." I looked him squarely in the eye. "No, she wouldn't," I said plainly. "And even if she would, that still doesn't give you the right to make decisions about my life or my home without asking me." My words were like whispers in the wind, ignored and forgotten the moment they left my lips. My father turned toward the moving truck and started unloading boxes, while my mother pushed past me into the house, behaving as if she had every right to be there. Stephanie followed behind her, already babbling about which shades of yellow she preferred for the nursery she intended to set up in my guest room. I stood frozen in my driveway, watching as the people who were supposed to love me the most invaded the sanctuary I had worked so hard to create. They moved with purpose and unity, a well-rehearsed team, executing a plan they had made without me. The betrayal pierced deeper than I could have imagined, but it also sparked something fierce within me, a flame of defiance that had long been buried beneath years of people-pleasing and quiet suffering. This wasn't just about square footage or real estate anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about self-worth. I couldn't, and wouldn't, allow them to trample over my independence any longer. Fueled by that fire, I stormed into the house behind them. My rage silenced the panic that had been building inside me all morning. In the kitchen, my mother was already rummaging through drawers and opening cabinets. "You'll probably want to take your nicer dishware with you," she said over her shoulder, completely unbothered. "But leave the everyday stuff for Stephanie. It'll save her money." In the living room, my father had placed several empty cardboard boxes on the floor and was now carefully wrapping my framed photographs, memories of vacations, friendships, and milestones, in old newspapers. "Stop!" I screamed, the word ripping out of me with a force I didn't know I had. "Stop this right now! You have no right to touch my things!" My mother didn't even look up. "Oh, Brooke, don't be dramatic," she said dismissively. "We're just trying to help. The faster we get you moved, the easier it'll be for everyone." "I'm not going anywhere," I declared, trying to steady my breathing. "This is my house. I did not agree to this, and I want you to leave. All of you." "No," she replied, standing firm. Jason had entered the house at this point, holding a thick baby product catalog. He lingered near the doorway, clearly uncomfortable, but said nothing. At least he wasn't pretending this was okay. "Honey," my father began, his voice taking on that condescending tone he had always used when I dared to disagree. "We already paid the deposit for the new apartment. It's a fantastic deal, and it's much better suited to your lifestyle." "My lifestyle?" I echoed, voice thick with disbelief. "You mean the lifestyle where I'm a successful marketing executive? The lifestyle where I've earned every inch of this home through long hours, promotions, and sacrifice?" "You know what we mean," my mother said, cutting in. "You're single, you work a lot, you don't need all this." "And Stephanie and Jason do?" I snapped. "Then they should buy a house. Just like I did." Stephanie stepped forward, one hand gently resting on her bump. "We can't afford to buy right now," she said with tears threatening to well up again. "Not with Jason out of work and the baby coming. Brooke, why can't you understand that we just need help?" "I understand you need help," I said slowly. "But I don't understand why that help should come at the cost of everything I've built. This house. This is the result of my dreams, my discipline, my work. I pay the mortgage, I pay the bills. It's mine." My mother stepped in again, her voice trembling with frustration. "Because we're family, and in this family we help each other." That phrase had become their favorite weapon. "Help each other," I repeated bitterly. "When have you ever helped me?" My mother flinched, but I didn't stop. "I put myself through college while you paid for Stephanie's. I built this life from scratch while you were throwing her a lavish wedding. And now? Now you're trying to take the one thing I've worked the hardest for and hand it over to her. just like everything else. Through the living room window, I noticed our elderly neighbors, the Nelsons, standing across the street. They were watching the unfolding drama with concern etched across their faces. Embarrassment flickered for a moment, but I didn't care, not anymore. "We're not taking anything from you," my father said, wrapping another picture frame despite his words. "We're trying to help both our daughters. Stephanie needs a home, and you need to downsize anyway." "I don't need to downsize," I countered, my voice sharp. "I love my home. I love having a place to work, a room for guests, and a yard to garden in. I chose this house for a reason. Every inch of it is filled with memories and meaning. It's mine, and you don't get to decide otherwise." Silence filled the room for a long, tense moment. No one moved. The audacity of what they were doing clashed with the disbelief that I was resisting them so directly. "I can't believe how ungrateful you're being," my mother finally said, her voice shaking. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I echoed, with a short laugh, not from humor but disbelief. "You mean the years of ignoring my achievements, the way you've undermined my choices because they didn't fit your vision of what success should look like?" Jason shifted awkwardly near the front door, looking like he wanted to disappear. Stephanie's bottom lip trembled as she leaned against the kitchen island, clearly hoping her tears would soften me. "Brooke," my father said, tone serious now. "This doesn't have to get ugly. Let's just be reasonable." "No," I said clearly. "This ends now. You are not moving me out of my house. You are not assigning rooms or unpacking boxes or decorating a nursery here. I'm calling the police if you don't leave." My mother gasped again, this time with genuine shock. "The police? Are you serious?" "As serious as I've ever been," I replied, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "This is trespassing, and if you don't leave, I will have you removed." Something in my tone must have finally landed because my father's hand paused mid-rap. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. Stephanie looked at me as if I'd slapped her, but this time, I didn't feel bad. "I love you all," I said, softer now, "but I will not be bullied, not in my home, not anymore." They stared at me, stunned into silence, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly heard. Throughout the chaos, Jason had remained largely silent. He lingered by the front door, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between family members as though unsure whether to stay or flee. Now, as the argument reached another fever pitch, he finally cleared his throat and spoke. "Maybe," he began cautiously, "maybe we should have talked to Brooke about this first." It was a moment of clarity, however fleeting, but before it could settle, my mother turned toward him, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't you start too," she snapped. "This is a family business." "Yes," I interjected quickly, "and in a healthy family that business includes communication, mutual respect, and boundaries. You would have come to me and asked my opinion, instead of organizing a coup and trying to move me out of my own home." Stephanie's response was almost immediate. Her sobs were loud, dramatic, and painfully rehearsed. "I just want a safe, happy home for my baby," she cried, burying her face in her hands. "Why are you being so mean to me? Why are you so cruel?" "I'm not being cruel," I said calmly but firmly. "I'm setting boundaries. This is my house. I own it. If you and Jason need help finding a place to live, I'll help. I'll even contribute to your deposit on a rental. But you are not moving into my home, and I am not moving out." Despite everything I had said, my father was still packing. He didn't even pause to look at me. He grabbed a box of my books and began heading for the front door. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Put that down," I demanded. "Brooke, don't be difficult," he said, brushing past my protests. "We found you a very nice apartment. You're just being stubborn." "Stubborn?" My voice rose. "I'm being selfish for wanting to stay in the home I bought, the one I pay for, the one that has only my name on the deed?" I barely noticed I was shouting now. I was furious, hurt, frustrated beyond words. From upstairs, I heard drawers opening and closing. I bolted up the stairs and stormed into my bedroom to find my mother calmly sorting through my clothes, stacking items into neat piles, as if preparing for a charity drop-off. "Get out of my room," I yelled, all patience gone. "Get out of my room, get out of my house, all of you." "We're just trying to help," she responded, folding another sweater without missing a beat. "I don't want your help," I said through gritted teeth. "I want you to stop this insanity and leave my home." Back downstairs, I could hear the sounds of boxes being shuffled and tape being pulled. I rushed to my window and looked out. My father was carrying another load toward the moving truck. Stephanie was in the yard, pointing animatedly, apparently laying out plans for a garden, while Jason followed her with a clipboard. I stood there breathless with disbelief. They were acting like my words didn't matter, like I wasn't the legal owner of this property, like my consent was just a formality, one they had already decided to bypass. When I returned to the first floor, my father was waiting for me with a smug expression. "We found you a perfect little studio near your office," he announced as if he were doing me a favor. "It's small but efficient. You'll love it. Grocery store, gym, all walking distance." "I'm not moving to a studio apartment," I said again, slower this time. My mother interjected with a tut of irritation. "We already paid for it. First month's rent, security deposit. It's done." "You paid for an apartment I didn't ask for?" I said, utterly incredulous. "Without even telling me, let alone showing it to me?" "We knew you'd like it," my father replied. "It's in a great building." "I don't care if the toilet is made of gold," I snapped. "I'm not moving. This is my house, and I'm staying here." As I stood there defending myself, my belongings were being systematically packed and removed. I was being forcibly relocated, from my own property, not by strangers but by my own flesh and blood. The violation was staggering. I had been arguing with them for over an hour. My pleas were being dismissed. My commands were ignored. And that's when it hit me. They weren't going to stop. No matter how many times I repeated myself, they were going to finish what they started. I stepped away, walked to the corner of my kitchen, and quietly pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number I never thought I'd have to call in this context. 911, "What's your emergency?" a calm voice asked. "I need help," I said, voice cracking. "My family is trying to move me out of my house without my permission. They're packing my belongings and refusing to leave." "Are you in any immediate danger?" the dispatcher asked. "No physical danger," I answered, "but they're ignoring me. They're removing my property. They're attempting to force me out of my home." She asked for my name, address, and a short description of what was happening. After I gave her all the necessary details, she assured me that officers were being dispatched. She advised me not to escalate anything further and to wait somewhere safe in the house if I felt threatened. I hung up and walked back into the living room. My mother noticed my phone in my hand. "Who were you talking to?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "The police," I answered without hesitation. "I've asked you all to leave. You've ignored me. You're trespassing and trying to take my possessions without my consent. That's illegal, and they're on their way." A heavy silence fell across the room. Then chaos erupted. Everyone started speaking at once. My mother demanded I hang up and be reasonable. My father insisted I was overreacting. Stephanie began crying again, blaming me for ruining her dream of raising a child in a beautiful home. But I didn't flinch, not this time. I had done everything I could to de-escalate, to reason, to compromise. But they had shown me they didn't respect me, so I did what they forced me to do. I protected myself. The noise of their objections blended together, a cacophony of excuses, accusations, and justifications. My mother insisted she was only doing what was best for everyone. My father claimed they were acting out of love. Stephanie accused me of hating her unborn child. Jason, to his credit, remained silent, his expression now clearly conflicted, as the reality of the situation settled on him. But I stood firm, rooted like the foundation of the very house they tried to take from me. "No one is moving me anywhere," I said, loud enough to rise above the shouting. "This is over. You need to leave, now." "You don't mean that," my mother said, voice breaking. "I do," I replied. "If you loved me, truly loved, you wouldn't be doing this." There was a knock on the door, quick, professional. Through the front window I saw two uniformed officers standing on the porch. I opened the door and let them in. "This is the homeowner," I heard one officer say into his radio as I stepped aside. The moment they entered, everything changed. My parents stopped packing. Stephanie's sobs quieted. Jason looked like he might faint. The illusion of control they'd built crumbled in an instant. "Ma'am," one officer said to me gently, "can you walk us through what's happening here?" And I did. I told them everything, every trespass, every box moved without consent, every word spoken over mine as if I didn't matter. As they listened, I could feel something in me shift. It was a strange but welcome relief. The feeling of finally being believed. "You called the police on your own family," my mother gasped, her hand flying dramatically to her chest as if she might collapse from the sheer betrayal. Her voice was filled with disbelief and wounded pride. My father's face turned beet red, a mixture of shock and fury contorting his features. "You can't be serious," he barked, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Stephanie, never one to miss a cue, let out a loud sob, her face contorting into anguish. "How could you do this to me?" she wailed, clutching her belly as if that alone should have made her immune to consequences. I'm pregnant, she reminded everyone, like it was some kind of universal pass to override boundaries. Even Jason, who had thus far remained a quiet, awkward observer, stepped forward, his expression strained. "Brooke," he said, voice low, "are you sure this is what you want? Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it," I replied, my tone calm despite the adrenaline surging through my body. My hands might have been trembling slightly, but my voice was steady. "You've all left me no choice. I've said no more than once. I've asked you to leave and you refused. What you're doing isn't just inconsiderate, it's illegal." My father's voice rose in volume and indignation. "We're your parents. We're just trying to help you." "No," I said firmly. "You're trying to help yourselves. You're trying to take what belongs to me and hand it over to Stephanie. That's not helpful. That's coercion and theft." My mother looked visibly shaken now, the reality beginning to register. Her hands were nervously wringing the edge of her cardigan. "It's not theft if it's family," she whispered, her voice laced with desperation, as though clinging to some old, misguided moral loophole. "That's not how the law works," I replied coldly. "This house is mine. My name is the only one on the deed, the mortgage, and the insurance. You don't have a single legal right to be here, and you certainly don't have the right to pack up my life and attempt to move me out." The next 15 minutes were excruciatingly tense. My parents clustered together near the fireplace, whispering in angry, frantic tones. Stephanie sat on the couch, sobbing into her hands, casting wounded glances at me every few moments, trying to silently guilt me into backing down. Jason stood awkwardly near the window, glancing out as if hoping the entire situation would just resolve itself. I stood rooted near the entryway, not saying another word, not moving an inch. Inside, I felt a strange calm blooming, an unshakable resolve I hadn't known I possessed. For years, I had bent over backward to maintain peace in this family. I had swallowed disappointment, endured neglect, and stayed silent in the shadow of favoritism, but not anymore. This wasn't just about a house. This was about reclaiming my agency, defending what I had built with my own two hands. Then finally, we heard it. The sharp slam of car doors closing. A moment later, 2 uniformed officers approached the front steps. I went to the door and opened it before they could knock. "Good afternoon, ma'am," said one of them, a composed, serious-looking woman whose name tag read Madison. "We received a call regarding a disturbance at this address?" "Yes," I confirmed, stepping aside to let them in. I called. "These people are my parents, my sister, and her husband. They showed up today with a moving truck, uninvited. They've been packing up my belongings and refusing to leave despite me asking repeatedly." Officer Madison and her partner, Officer Reynolds, surveyed the living room, taking in the stacked boxes, the open drawers, the tense expressions frozen across my family's faces. The moving truck loomed visible through the front windows like a monument to their audacity. "Is this your primary residence?" Officer Madison asked, turning to me. "Yes, I purchased it 3 years ago. I'm the sole owner. My name is the only one on the title and the mortgage." Her eyes moved to my father. "Sir, can you confirm that?" He shifted uncomfortably but gave a stiff nod. "That's true, but we're her parents. We're only trying to help her, and her sister. Stephanie is pregnant and needs this house." "I understand," Officer Madison said, her voice neutral but firm. "But regardless of your relationship, if the homeowner has asked you to leave, you are required to do so. You cannot remove someone from their home or move their belongings without legal authority or consent." My mother stepped forward, her voice rising again. "But we already paid for an apartment for Brooke. It's closer to her office and more practical for her lifestyle. Stephanie needs this space." The old major smiled dryly. "That doesn't change the law," Officer Reynolds said calmly. "Your daughter is the legal owner. She alone has the right to decide who stays and what happens here." "This is absurd," my father muttered. "This is a family matter. We shouldn't need the police involved." Officer Madison raised an eyebrow. "When a family matter escalates to potential trespassing and unauthorized removal of property, then yes, we do need to be involved." She turned to me. "Do you wish to press charges?" I hesitated, my heart clenched. As angry as I was, the thought of taking this further, of criminally charging my own parents, was a bitter pill. "Not at this time," I said quietly. "I just want them to leave and take everything they brought with them." "Understood," Officer Madison replied. "Then I need to ask everyone here who does not reside at this address to vacate immediately. Any of the homeowner's property that was removed or packed should be returned to its original location." My mother gasped, clutching her purse tighter. "This is so unfair. We're her family." Being a parent doesn't grant you legal rights over your adult child's property, Officer Reynolds said simply. Stephanie finally stood up. Her eyes were red and puffy, but she was no longer crying. She glared at me as though I'd personally betrayed her. "You're really choosing a house over your family?" she asked, her voice trembling with accusation. "Over your niece or nephew?" I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, I saw her for who she truly was. A woman raised to believe her needs always came first, who genuinely couldn't fathom being told no. I felt a strange mix of sorrow and exhaustion. "I'm not choosing a house over you," I said softly but firmly. "I'm choosing to respect myself. I'm choosing to honor what I've worked for. I've spent my whole life putting this family's needs before mine. Not anymore." "But it would be so much easier if you just said yes," she said, looking confused. "Easier for you," I said, "but devastating for me." The officers remained present as my parents and Stephanie were made to return everything they had packed into the moving truck. My father carried box after box back into the house, each one with a bitterness that radiated from him like steam. My mother wept quietly and muttered under her breath about betrayal. Stephanie sulked in the front yard while Jason tried to look invisible. And I stood by the doorway, watching it all unfold, resolute and unshaken, for the first time truly claiming my space, my voice, and my right to be heard. Stephanie sat stiffly on the couch, arms folded tightly over her growing belly, her posture a perfect display of theatrical defiance and injured pride. She made no effort to help reverse the damage her family had done to my home. Instead, she just stared ahead with an expression that seemed to say, "Look what you've done," as though I were the one in the wrong. As my family gathered their things and prepared to leave, my mother turned to me with a look of utter dismay. Her voice trembled with a mixture of sadness and disbelief. "I never thought I would see the day," she said bitterly, "calling the police on your own parents, on your pregnant sister." "What kind of person does that?" she asked, shaking her head slowly, as though I had just committed the ultimate betrayal. "The kind who's finally learned to respect herself," I replied, my voice calm but resolute. "I didn't want this to happen, but you left me with no other choice. I begged you to stop. I asked you to leave. You refused. What else was I supposed to do?" "There are always choices," my father said, his voice ice cold as he adjusted the strap of his watch. "And you've made yours perfectly clear today." And with that they left. The moving truck backed slowly out of my driveway, its presence now a grotesque reminder of the attempted coup. Jason's SUV followed close behind, with Stephanie in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Not one of them looked back. The officers waited until my driveway was clear before speaking again. Officer Madison looked at me. Her earlier firmness softened into a sympathetic gaze. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked gently. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said, though deep down, I wasn't entirely sure if that was true. "Thank you both. For everything." Officer Reynolds gave a small nod and added, "You might want to change your locks, just to be safe." They left soon after, and I was finally alone. The silence that followed was deafening. My home, once a sanctuary of peace and independence, now felt hollow, like a battlefield after the dust had settled. Half-packed boxes still cluttered my floors. Open drawers exposed the remnants of my personal life that had nearly been stolen. I stood in the living room, stunned, my breath shallow and uneven. I should have felt victorious. I had defended what was mine. I had stood my ground against years of favoritism and manipulation. But instead, a wave of sadness washed over me, deep, aching and heavy, not for what I had lost today, but for everything I had endured to reach this breaking point, for the years I'd spent trying to earn my parents' approval, for the sister who always got everything she wanted at my expense, always the support system whose unselfishness had always felt like it would shatter and she'd wake up at my desk, for the love I had craved but never truly received. Despite the exhaustion pressing down on me, I knew I couldn't leave things the way they were. I needed to reclaim my space. I began slowly unpacking the boxes they had filled, placing my books back on their shelves, returning framed photos to the walls, restoring my home one memory at a time. Every item I touched felt like a declaration. I live here. This is my life, my space, my rules. When I had finished, I sat down on my couch, the same place Stephanie had sat earlier, pouting in protest. The irony didn't escape me. The silence was crushing, not peaceful, just empty. Taking Officer Reynolds' advice, I called a locksmith. He arrived within the hour and changed every lock on every door. It was a cost I hadn't budgeted for, but I didn't care. The security and peace of mind were worth it. Watching him install the new locks felt symbolic, a new chapter, sealed from the chaos of the past. When he left, I was alone again, and the weight of the day finally broke me. I curled up on my couch, hugging a throw pillow to my chest, and cried. Not the quiet tears of frustration, but the guttural sobs of a woman mourning the family she never really had. I cried for the unequal treatment, for the constant erasure of my worth, for the fact that standing up for myself had resulted in being vilified. After what felt like hours, I wiped my face and forced myself to breathe deeply. The crying had left me hollow but strangely clear. For the first time in a long time, I saw things without illusion. I knew what I had done was right, no matter how painful it had been. After a few seconds of wiping my face, but the fallout came quickly. My phone, which had been silent during the confrontation, began buzzing non-stop. Messages, voicemails, missed calls. The news had spread. My parents had wasted no time twisting the story for our extended family. They painted me as the villain who had heartlessly called the cops on a pregnant woman and two aging parents. Texts rolled in. Aunt Linda. I heard what happened. How could you be so cruel to your own sister, especially in her condition? Uncle Robert. Your parents raised you better than this. Cousin Emily. Choosing a house over your own blood? I can't even look at you the same. Not a single message asked for my side of the story. No one wanted to know why a seemingly rational woman would resort to police intervention. They just believed the narrative handed to them, one where I was the selfish daughter, the cold sister, the ungrateful child. I turned off my phone, heart pounding with fury and heartbreak. I couldn't face the wave of judgment pouring in from people who only ever saw me through the lens my parents had created. Lesser than Stephanie, always the one to blame. The next morning it got worse. Stephanie had gone public. I discovered her post while scrolling social media, my thumb freezing mid-swipe. There she was, tearful, in a carefully staged photo, hand resting protectively on her belly. The caption? A gut-wrenching tale about how her cruel older sister had thrown her out, called the police, and denied her unborn baby a home. She painted herself as the picture of innocence, a vulnerable pregnant woman crushed by her sister's heartlessness. There was no mention of the moving truck, the packing of my belongings, or the studio apartment they tried to dump me in without my consent. The comments made my stomach turn. What kind of monster calls the cops on their pregnant sister? You deserve better. Family should come first. She must be jealous of you. You're going to be a great mom. Each comment twisted the knife deeper. They didn't know the truth, and worse, they didn't care to learn it. But amid the tidal wave of sympathy and blind support, there were glimmers of light. Audrey, my best friend, had seen the post and called me almost immediately. This is absolutely insane, she fumed. I can't believe she's making you out to be the bad guy. I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You did what you had to do. Her words felt like a balm on an open wound. For the first time in days, I felt like someone truly understood. Audrey's voice crackled through the phone, thick with disbelief. They tried to literally steal your house, Brooke, and somehow you're the bad guy? There was a pause. I'm coming over. True to her word, she showed up an hour later with Michael, another close friend from our college days. They weren't empty-handed. Audrey carried 2 paper bags loaded with Chinese takeout, and Michael brought wine and a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. But most importantly, they came bearing what I needed most in that moment: unshakable support. As soon as they stepped through the door, the tension in my chest eased, if only slightly. The house was still a mess of emotional fallout, half-packed boxes, and the echoes of everything my family had said. But with Audrey and Michael there, it no longer felt like a place of betrayal. It began to feel like mine again. I already left a comment on Stephanie's post, Michael said, handing me a glass of wine. Laid out exactly what happened. Not that it'll change a lot of minds, but at least someone's telling the truth. You shouldn't have to defend yourself at all, Audrey added fiercely, setting down the food on my dining table. What they did was so out of line I can't even comprehend it. Who shows up with a moving truck and thinks they're entitled to your house? They do, I said, with a bitter laugh. My family's always had this twisted logic when it comes to Stephanie. She gets what she wants, and I'm supposed to understand. You did the right thing by calling the cops, Audrey said firmly. They backed you into a corner. What were you supposed to do, just let them bulldoze you? Their presence grounded me. For the first time since the confrontation, I didn't feel like I was overreacting or imagining things. I felt seen, heard, understood. But peace didn't last long. The next day I opened my email to find a message from my parents' shared account, though the tone and structure made it obvious my father had written it. Attached was a spreadsheet titled Expenses for Brooke, and in the body of the email was a cold message. Since you've made it clear that family obligations mean nothing to you, we expect repayment of the following expenses. I opened the attachment, stunned. Line after line, itemized costs for everything from hospital delivery charges to school lunches to emotional support during adolescence. Yes, they'd tried to put a dollar value on parenting. My jaw dropped when I saw they even included gas money for driving me to college interviews. It was so ridiculous. I might have laughed if it hadn't stung so badly. They were literally trying to invoice me for being born and raised. The audacity was staggering. It was no longer about the house. It was about power, control, and punishment for daring to say no. And the harassment didn't stop there. When I stopped answering their calls, my parents began calling my workplace. Diane, my manager, called me into her office after the third such incident. She was a seasoned executive and had always treated me with professionalism and empathy. But now her brow furrowed with concern. "Brooke, is everything all right at home?" she asked gently. "Your parents have called the front desk several times asking for you. They seem distressed." Embarrassment flushed through me. "I'm so sorry they've involved the office. We're going through a personal issue, and they're not respecting my boundaries." Diane nodded slowly. "I understand. Just let us know if it affects your work. We're here to support you." Grateful, but humiliated, I realized I had to draw a firmer line. I couldn't afford to let this leak into my career, one of the few areas of my life where I felt competent and respected. I called Audrey, who immediately connected me with her cousin Mark, a family law attorney. We met at a cafe later that day, and I spilled everything. The emails, the calls to work, the social media smear campaign. "You don't need a restraining order just yet," Mark said calmly. "But you should send them a cease and desist letter. It establishes a legal paper trail and gives them formal notice to stop this behavior. If they keep it up, you'll have grounds for a stronger response." It felt cold, impersonal, even cruel. But I agreed. Within 48 hours, a formal cease and desist letter was sent to my parents and to Stephanie. It demanded that they stop contacting my employer, cease defamatory social media posts, and avoid coming to my home without explicit permission. Mailing that letter was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. It felt like a point of no return, but it was also liberating. For the first time, I had legal protection backing up my boundaries. The response was predictably hostile. They retained a lawyer of their own, who replied that my family had done nothing wrong and claimed I was overreacting. Stephanie continued to post online, less directly now, but still weaponizing sympathy to maintain her narrative. The damage was already done. My reputation among our extended family and many old acquaintances had been scorched, but in the wreckage, I began the slow work of healing. I started therapy. Dr. Reynolds was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma. At our first session, I told her everything, from childhood favoritism to the moving truck incident. "What you're describing is a textbook golden child/scapegoat dynamic," she explained. "One child becomes the favored one, often idealized, while the other is expected to be resilient, independent, and sacrificial." "But why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for decades. "Why couldn't they just love us both?" Dr. Reynolds smiled sadly. "Sometimes it's projection. One child reminds a parent of someone they loved, or someone they resented. Sometimes it's simply about which child fits better with the parent's emotional needs or worldview. But it's never about your value or your lovability. It's about them, not you." And her words hit me like a wave, both painful and profoundly freeing. For so long, I had internalized their rejection as evidence that something was wrong with me, that if only I had been better, quieter, more compliant, they would have loved me the way they loved Stephanie. Now I knew better. Their behavior was a reflection of their dysfunction, not my deficiency. Work became a refuge. I immersed myself in projects, meetings, and campaigns. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of normalcy. My colleagues valued me, my boss respected me, my accomplishments were acknowledged and rewarded, unlike the thankless sacrifices I had made for my family. Slowly, the ache in my chest began to dull. Not disappear, never fully disappear, but become bearable. Evenings were the hardest. That was when the silence of the house returned, pressing against me like a weight. I missed the illusion of family, even if it had been flawed. I missed the idea that someday things might change, that we might be equals. But that fantasy had been shattered, and in its place, I was building something new. With the help of therapy, supportive friends, and a renewed sense of self-worth, I was laying the foundation for a life that no longer depended on the approval of people who had never truly seen me. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal, from the people who should have protected me, and survived. And in that survival, I found clarity. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't cruel. I was simply no longer willing to sacrifice my peace for someone else's entitlement. This house, my house, stood as a symbol of that truth, a home earned, defended, and claimed in full. And that, I realized, was something no one could ever take away from me again. One unexpected outcome of the entire ordeal was discovering the depth of support from my chosen family, the friends who stood by me without hesitation when everything fell apart. Audrey and Michael, along with a few other close friends, became my lifeline. We began a tradition of weekly dinners, rotating who hosted and who brought dessert, sharing stories from our week, venting about life, and celebrating each other's victories. Whether it was help with repainting a room, lifting heavy boxes, or simply being there to listen, they made it clear that I wasn't alone. "You know, this is more like a real family than anything I've ever known," Michael said one evening, lifting his fork from a plate of lasagna as we all sat around my dining room table. "Chosen family," Audrey added, raising her glass with a quiet conviction. "The ones who love you for exactly who you are, not for what they can take from you." That idea, chosen family, became my anchor as I continued rebuilding. I may have lost the fantasy of a loving biological family, but I had gained something arguably more real, a circle of people who valued mutual respect, trust, and genuine care. Roughly 3 months after that chaotic showdown, I received an unexpected text message from Jason. It was the first time any member of my biological family had reached out since I'd sent the cease and desist letter. "Brooke, I owe you an apology," the message read. "I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't speak up when I should have. Stephanie had the baby yesterday. A girl, Lily. I understand if you don't want any contact, but I thought you should know." I sat on the couch for a long time, rereading the message over and over, emotions tangling inside me. I had a niece now, a little girl who had nothing to do with the betrayal or the drama. I replied, keeping my tone measured. "Thank you for the message and congratulations on your daughter. I appreciate the apology. I need time, but I don't want to close the door completely." It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall, a possible beginning, if not of restoration, then at least of understanding. Life, after all, continued on. 6 months passed since the day they showed up with a moving truck and tried to force me out of my own house. In that time I transformed, not only my space but my mindset. The immediate weeks were tough. I spent many nights second-guessing myself. Did I go too far? Should I have just let them stay for a little while to avoid all this conflict? Would peace have been worth the sacrifice? Therapy with Dr. Reynolds became a lifeline. "Brooke," she asked gently one afternoon, "what would you say to a friend if they came to you with your exact story?" I paused, but the answer was obvious. I'd say she was absolutely right to defend her home. I'd tell her she deserved better. "Then why don't you deserve the same?" Dr. Reynolds asked, her eyes kind. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I had spent my life being the peacekeeper, the easy one, the daughter who didn't ask for much and quietly stepped aside. But now I had taken a stand, not just for property, but for dignity. Professionally, life took a dramatic turn for the better. After returning from my week of leave, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. Diane, my manager, was supportive and reassuring. "Family stuff is messy," she said, after I confided in her. "But you're brilliant at what you do. That hasn't changed." 3 months later, I was promoted to creative director. The position came with not only a new title and responsibilities, but also a significant pay bump. I used some of the money to renovate parts of my home, reinvesting in the space that I had fought to protect. I chose bold colors that reflected my tastes, redesigned the guest room into a serene reading nook and yoga space, and expanded my garden out back. Each nail hammered and paint stroke applied was a reaffirmation of my autonomy. I had reclaimed my home not just physically, but emotionally. Extended family relations remained complicated. Some relatives on my mother's side bought the narrative my parents were selling and stopped reaching out. Others tried to stay neutral. But one surprising voice emerged from the noise. Uncle David, my father's older brother. He called me one evening. "I just want you to know," he began after a long pause. "I get it. Your dad and I were raised in a household where favoritism ruled everything. I was always the one who had to sacrifice. I know how much that hurts. And I'm sorry you're dealing with it now." That simple call was more healing than I expected. To have someone from within my family not only validate my experience, but relate to it, reminded me that the problem didn't start with me. It was generational, deeply ingrained, and not mine to fix. As the months went by, I found more peace. I learned to stop waiting for the apology that might never come. I stopped checking Stephanie's social media to see what new narrative she was spinning. I stopped replaying the confrontation in my mind and started focusing on what was ahead. There were moments I still grieved. I missed the family I wished I had. I mourned the version of my parents that never truly existed, the ones who would celebrate me not for what I could give, but for who I was. But in place of that grief, I was building something more durable, a life defined not by sacrifice, but by choice. A home not built for others' comfort, but as a refuge for my own peace. And every time I stepped through the front door, I remembered, I had fought for this. And I had won. In reclaiming my story, I also rediscovered joy in the small things. Quiet mornings sipping coffee by my newly planted hydrangeas, hosting game nights, where laughter echoed through my living room. Baking old family recipes that I had once thought were tainted by memory but now infused with new meaning. I started journaling regularly, chronicling the emotional journey, not for anyone else's eyes but for mine. There was a power in writing the truth down, unfiltered and unjudged. With each entry, I grew a little stronger, a little more rooted in the reality I had fought to protect. As autumn rolled in and the leaves began to turn, I felt a sense of calm that had eluded me for most of my life. It wasn't that everything was perfect, far from it, but for the first time, my peace wasn't contingent on someone else's approval or happiness. It belonged to me, earned and preserved through resilience and self-respect. I was no longer merely surviving under the weight of old expectations. I was thriving, guided by clarity, courage, and a newfound appreciation for the life I was creating on my own terms. And that, more than anything, was the legacy I chose to carry forward. Uncle David's acknowledgement that the favoritism I experienced was real, not just some exaggerated perception, hit me harder than I expected. For years, I had wrestled with the possibility that I was simply imagining the unequal treatment, but hearing him admit that he too had grown up under similar circumstances gave me clarity. It wasn't just me. The dynamic didn't begin with my parents. It had been handed down through generations, like an unwanted heirloom. My father had once been the golden child in his own household, just as Stephanie was now in ours. As for my immediate family, our relationship remained a fractured mosaic of awkward interactions and long silences. Jason, surprisingly, was the only one who maintained a thread of connection. His updates about Lily came infrequently but respectfully, always careful not to push for more than I was ready to give. He never brought up reconciliation, never pressured me for a family reunion. His texts were brief, factual, and free of drama. And that in itself was a relief. My parents, for their part, kept their distance. Whether out of shame, pride, or simple stubbornness, they only reached out through generic gestures. An obligatory birthday card from my mother, signed with a short note in her careful cursive, void of warmth but not entirely hostile. It read like a strained peace offering from someone who still didn't quite grasp what they had done wrong. Stephanie remained an iceberg, cold, silent, unmoved. She had made no attempt to contact me directly. The gap between us, once wide, now seemed impossible to bridge. And yet, even without conversation, her absence echoed louder than any shouting match could. So life moved forward. I eventually met my niece, Lily. She was 4 months old when Jason brought her to a local park, neutral ground, free of memories and tension. The meeting was brief and emotionally tangled. Holding Lily, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. An immediate connection, protectiveness, tenderness, and also deep sadness for everything that had been lost. I looked at her tiny face and silently vowed that I would be something different in her life. A stable, boundary-respecting adult. Someone who showed her that love doesn't require submission or sacrifice. "She has your eyes," Jason said with a quiet smile as I cradled her. "Poor kid," I joked, earning a laugh from him, maybe the first genuine one we had shared since everything fell apart. It was a moment that felt like a small beginning, not forgiveness, but perhaps the planting of a seed, a future where things could grow differently, more honestly. Meanwhile, my chosen family grew stronger. The friends who had stood by me through the worst, Audrey, Michael, and a few others, became my inner circle. We established routines that gave us something to look forward to. Weekly Sunday brunches at my place, group texts filled with encouragement and memes, and spontaneous movie nights when the week had been too long. "You know," Michael said one Sunday afternoon as we lounged in my living room, full of pancakes and laughter. Your house has become the new community center. We should install a sign. Ironic, considering what happened, I said. Maybe not ironic, Audrey replied. Maybe this house was always meant to be filled with love, just not the kind your family envisioned. She was right. This space had become something more than shelter. It was now a sanctuary, not just for me, but for the people who had chosen me, just as I had chosen them. About 4 months after the confrontation, I met someone new, Daniel, a graphic designer I'd known by name for years but only met in person at a charity fundraiser through my company. Our first conversation was easy, natural, in a way that I hadn't expected. There was no tension, no guessing games, no emotional labor, just connection. As we began seeing each other, I hesitated to bring up my family. Part of me feared that telling him the truth would be a test I wouldn't pass. Would he see me as dramatic? Difficult? But when I finally shared the full story, his reaction was instant and clear. "They tried to force you out of your own house?" he said, incredulous. "And they were mad at you for stopping them?" Wow, Brooke. You did exactly what you had to do. His validation meant more than I could express, not because I needed someone to approve of my choices, but because his support came without qualifiers, without conditions. He didn't try to play devil's advocate. He didn't say, "But they're your family." He simply listened and believed me. Daniel respected every boundary I had. If a subject felt too sensitive, he gave it space. If I needed to be alone, he understood. If I needed to talk, he made time. Being with someone who didn't require me to justify my emotions was transformative. "You know," he said one night as we made dinner together, "it's not supposed to be this hard. Healthy relationships, they're built on respect. That's the baseline. Anything less isn't love, it's manipulation." And with that, I understood how far I'd come. Through therapy, honest reflection, and surrounding myself with people who valued me, I had finally begun to unravel the years of conditioning that told me I wasn't enough, that I had to earn love by sacrificing, that I was somehow less deserving than my sister. The incident with the moving truck had been the climax of decades of imbalance. But it was also the catalyst. It forced the truth out into the open, where it could no longer be ignored or excused. My family may never fully understand what they did, or why I responded the way I did. But I understand, and that's what matters now. Dr. Reynolds once told me, "You don't need your family's permission to heal, and you don't need their validation to move forward." Those words stuck with me. They freed me. Today, my home is not just a structure. It's a reflection of who I've become. Every wall painted in a color I love, every item inside it chosen with intention. The guest room is no longer a source of tension. It's now a cozy space for visiting friends. The garden is lush with flowers and herbs, a living symbol of growth and renewal. Professionally, I continue to thrive. I've been promoted, recognized, and trusted with bigger projects. My career is no longer the only part of my life where I feel valued. And personally, I am surrounded by love, not the kind that demands, but the kind that gives. Not the kind that wounds, but the kind that heals. My relationship with my parents and sister remains distant. We exchange polite messages on holidays and special occasions, but the closeness they once demanded is no longer expected, or owed. Maybe time will soften the sharp edges. Maybe it won't. But either way, I'm at peace. Because at the end of it all, I didn't just keep my house. I reclaimed my voice, my boundaries, my worth. And that's the story I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. True family celebrates your achievements, not by using them for their own gain, but by genuinely honoring your hard work and cheering you on with pride. They understand the importance of boundaries, not as barriers to love, but as the framework that allows love to thrive. I've learned that advocating for yourself, for your peace, for your space, is not selfish. It's a vital act of self-respect. It's the foundation of any relationship that claims to be rooted in love and trust. Most importantly, I've come to understand that home isn't just the place where you get mail or the name etched on a mortgage contract. A true home is where you are not just allowed but encouraged to be your full, authentic self. It's where you are valued not just for what you can give but for who you are. My house, the one I fought so hard to keep, is still mine, but now more than ever, it feels like home in the truest sense of the word. It's filled with love, laughter, and people who choose me every day. If you're watching this and struggling with setting boundaries with your family, please know you are not alone. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to say no. And it's okay to walk away from relationships that refuse to honor your worth. Often the most painful choices are the ones that lead to our deepest growth. Family, real family, should lift you up, not tear you down. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe. To hear more stories of healing, growth, and reclaiming your voice, leave a comment below. Your truth might be the light someone else needs to find their way.